Okay, hello everyone. All right, so the next program in chapter 6 is deposit and withdrawal files. All right, so use Notepad or another text editor to create a text file named Deposits.txt. The file should contain the following numbers, 1 per line. So these are the numbers we're going to save in Deposits.txt file. Next, create a text file named Withdrawals.txt. The file should contain the following numbers, 1 per line. So these numbers are the numbers we're going to save in our Withdrawals.txt file. The numbers in the Deposits.txt file are the amounts of deposits that were made to a savings account during the month. And the numbers in the Withdrawals.txt file are the amount of withdrawals that were made during the month. Write a program that creates an instance of the savings account class that you wrote in Programming Challenge 12. That's the previous program. The starting balance for the object is $500. The program should read the values from the Deposits.txt file and use the objects method to add them to the account balance. The program should read the values from the Withdrawals.txt file and use the objects method to subtract them from the account balance. The program should call the class method to calculate the monthly interest and then display the ending balance and the total interest earned. Okay, so in this program, you're going to use the savings account class we created in the previous program, which is the savings account class. And we are going to create a program that is going to use that class. We're going to create two text files, deposits.txt and withdrawals.txt. We're going to save these numbers in the deposits.txt file and these numbers in the withdrawals.txt file. And then we're going to basically go through the file, pull these numbers, and then use our class to manipulate it. We're going to deposit and withdraw with a starting balance of $500. They're going to call some of the methods to calculate the monthly interest, and then we'll display the final balance. All right, so we can actually use code to create these files and actually even type in or input these files in the file. Basically type in or basically use a mechanism to get these numbers in the file. But the question didn't say that. The question kept it simple and said, open a text editor and then type in these numbers, right? And since this is not really about typing in or getting the numbers in there with code, we're going to just open a file and type it in there, right? And we're going to use the class to actually manipulate these numbers. So let's just do that, right? If you're on Mac, you can use text edit. If you're on Windows, you can use Notepad or any text editor. Really, any text editor. It doesn't have to be strictly text edit on Mac or Windows or Notepad on Windows. All right, so I'm going to use text edit for mine. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and then I'm going to save this as first of all, on the Mac by default text edit saves file in RTF rich text version. Okay, it's by default like this. When you have this version turned on, when you save content in the file, it's going to have extra formatting in there. So when you try to read from that file, you're going to read all those extra formatting, right? So you really want to change it to plain text. Why? Because when you save or when you type numbers in the TXT file, it's not going to have any extra formatting. It's just going to be whatever you typed into the file, right? So change it to plain text, and that's all you're going to have, right? So I changed mine already, so make sure it's here, and then you're done. And we're done here too. I think we don't have to change anything else. So close it, and then now let's just type in these files, or we can copy it, right? We can just copy and paste. Make sure when you're copying and pasting, you don't copy. So over here you can see that I'm copying an extra space after each number, right? I'll make sure I delete it. Although I don't think it really matters. You can trim it with a function or anything, but I'm just going to delete mine. Or you can, just to be safe, you can just type in these numbers. There's an extra space here. It doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to clear it just so it doesn't have any effect. All right. Okay, so this, we're supposed to save it in a file called deposits.txt. So I'm going to go ahead and save it as deposit.txt. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a folder I'm going to go to the desktop, create a folder on the in our folder where we save all our our Java programs. So it's on the desktop. I have shortcuts there. So Java Programming Challenges Chapter 6, and then I'll create a folder. I'll call it deposits and withdrawals, right? No, deposits and withdrawal files. So deposit and withdrawal files. Okay, so this is just the folder, and I'm saving Deposits.txt in that folder. Why? Because we are going to keep all our files here, all our two files, our class and our main program itself, so that they can all see each other so that when we refer to one program or one class or one file in another, so that when we refer to the files, okay, since they are all in the same folder, they can find each other. If you're in different locations, you'd have to import it. Okay, that you'd have to tell each file where each file is located, pretty much. But if you save all your files in one folder, then when you run it or when you try to use each other, when they try to use each other, they can find each other. It's going to be straightforward. But you get an understanding of it once I do it. I'm basically saving all the files in one folder. It's easier that way, so they can all see each other. All right, so deposits.txt, I'm saving it here. All right, so that's done. I'm going to go ahead and close it, and then I'll create another file. And then I'm going to call that Withdrawals.txt. I'm going to go ahead and paste this too. I know I'm going to copy that extra space. You can leave it in there and just try to see what happens, but I don't think it's really going to affect it. In Python, I think you have to trim it. In Java, I think so too, but just delete that extra character at the end if you copy it and paste it. Although it shouldn't really affect it, I don't think so. If it does, you can trim it. All right, but just to delete it, just to be safe, or just to be okay, to feel good. All right, so save this as Withdrawal.txt in the same location. All right, so we've saved our two files. So now let's move on. So it tells us that the numbers in the Deposits.txt file are the amount of deposits that were made to a savings account during the month, and the numbers in the Withdrawals.txt file are the amounts of withdrawals that were made during the month. All right, so write a program that creates an instance of the savings account class. So we will need our savings account class, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and make a copy of that class and then paste it here. So I'm going to open the previous program, which is savings account class here, savings account, and then I'm going to just copy the savings account. This is the savings account class, and this is the program, the test program that was testing this class. So actually, what I'll do is I'll just open the folder itself and make a copy of it. So make a copy of just the Java file, nothing else. That's it. Close this. Come back here. Actually, go back. Open the new program the new folder we just created, and then paste it here. So now we have a copy of the class, right? So it's just a copy. The other one's still there. Okay. All right, so I can open it just so we can see the content of it. So when I open, not the savings account class, but when I open the new program, the folder we just created, deposits and withdrawal files, I can see that the class is here. Let's just open it so we can see the contents in there. If you didn't create this, just refer to the previous program and then create it. But here is the class itself. You can pause this video right now and then copy it and save it as a savings account.java, or basically whatever you want to save it as. But the question said savings account.java, so the previous question. All right, so now we have our program. Let's go ahead and create the class, and then we'll move on with the question. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create the class and I'll call it deposit and withdrawal files. It's a long name, but I'm sure I've said it so many times that I like long names, so it's not really an issue for me. But if you want to make it short, go ahead and do that. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and create the main method. Okay. So the question continues and says, write a program that creates an instance of the savings account class that you wrote in Programming Challenge 12. The starting balance for the object is $500. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and create this. Let's take it step by step and create an instance of the savings account class, right? So to create an instance of the savings account class, you type in the name of the class, savings account, and then a class type variable, a class type reference variable that's going to reference that object. So I'm going to call this one account1. It's just the name I came up with. Now when you do this, it's similar to creating a variable like int, let's say number, right? Int is a type, number is the name of the variable. You can think of this as a type, the name of the variable, but this type is not one of the primitive types. It's not one of the primitive data types. It's not an int, it's not a double, it's not a character. So Java is going to see that and say, okay, since this is not one of the primitive data types, I'm going to look in your folder or look to see if you've provided me any path to a class, okay, and see if that class is there. So it's going to look in your folder to see if that class is there, or if you've given it a path where the class is, it's going to look at that path to see where the class is there. So it finds this class and says, okay, you are trying to create a variable that references, or a variable that's going to reference a savings account object. So I'm going to reserve this variable to represent an object. That's all it's doing now. So now I need to go ahead and create the new savings account class. Right, sorry, a new savings account class, and this is basically going to return the memory address of the savings account did I say create a new savings account class? No, I didn't mean that. =, new savings account class. Savings account is pretty much going to, it's not going to create a savings account class, okay? It's going to create a new savings account object in memory and return, this =, is going to return the memory address of that particular savings account object, okay? I think I said savings account, I said savings account class. It's going to create a new savings account object and then return the memory address of that object to account1. Right. All right. So basically, account1 will reference that object, right? So the way we define the savings account class is to accept a starting balance. So we have to go ahead and specify a starting balance. We don't have any other constructor that that accepts no arguments, right? This is the only constructor we have, so that's all we have to use, right? Okay, so I'm going to specify a starting balance, and the question told us over here that write a program that creates an instance of the savings account class that you wrote in Program Challenge 12. The starting balance for the object is $500. It tells us that, so I'm going to type in 500 as a starting balance because we defined this to accepting a starting balance. All right, let's see the next thing. The program should read the values from the Deposits.txt file and use the object method to add them to the account balance. Okay, so we are going to read from the Deposit.txt file and use the object method to to add them to the account balance. Now we created a deposit method over here, and the deposit method is just basically going to take in an amount and add it to the balance. But it wants us to read from the Deposits.txt file that we created in our folder. Basically, it wants us to read from the Deposits.txt file, this one, preview of it. Okay, this is just a preview of it. All right, so since we are going to be dealing with files, right, we need to go ahead and import the class or all the classes that deals with files. So I'm going to do that. Import java.io, okay, **, which means import all the classes in the java.io package, right? And all those classes deal with files. And then now that I've imported those classes, I can work with them, right? So I'm going to create a file object to represent a file. So to do that, I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call this deposits file. Now you can create. I think you can create one file object, right? You can create a generic object and say this is a file, right? And use that to represent both files. Use one after the one. When you're done, you use the next one. But let's just, for the sake of clarity, let's create two separate file objects. So file, and I'm going to call this deposit file, right? It's going to be equal to a new file. And what file is it? It's the deposit. You have to specify the file name. It's the deposit.txt file. All right. So it's going to find the deposit.txt file. This is going to creating a file object. And what file is it? It's the deposit.txt file. This class type variable is going to represent that file. All right. Now we need to read from that file, right? And we need a scanner to handle that. So we need to go ahead and import the scanner since we're going to be using it too. So import, well, it doesn't matter if you type it on the top, on the bottom, or on in the top, right? I'm just going to go ahead and type it anywhere. So import java.util.scanner. Right now we've imported the scanner class. Now with the scanner class, you have to go ahead and declare an object, so you can before you can use it. So I'm going to do the same thing, just like we created an object here. We created an object here. You have to create an object for the scanner class too. All right, so I'm going to do that here. Probably not. Okay, let me just put them together. Hopefully you can see it. All right, you can just do this so we can see all of them. Or you know what? I'll just space it just so it's clear. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and create a scanner object. So basically, I'm creating a scanner class type variable right now. I'm going to call it input file. Right. So I've created a scanner class type variable called input file, and then I'm going to create a new scanner object in memory. Right. The scanner constructor, okay, accepts the source where you want to read from. Okay, it's a scanner. It says, okay, my job is to scan from things. Okay, now over here specify the thing that you want me to scan from or read from. Now we have our deposit file. This is representing our deposit file, so we can use that and say, okay, you, the scanner, read from this deposit file. Right, so now this is going to now represent our deposit file, but then it has more capability. It has other functionality to read from the file and do a whole bunch of stuff with it. This is just a file, and this can do stuff with the file. You know, it's a scanner object, okay, and it can. Well, this is just a source, right? It's representing a scanner, okay, that is connected to the deposit file and can read from it, and this is the file itself. All right, now, what if there's no way for us to, assuming we didn't know what's in the deposit file? There can be 100 lines of code, there can be 200 lines of code, there can be 2,000 lines of code in there. We don't have to open the file, okay, to count the lines and then it'll create a loop to basically loop through, you know, that many lines. If it was 1,000,000 lines, we can't. It's going to be hectic to count it, right? So we can use a while loop, okay? We can check to see anytime there is a line, read it and move on to the next line, and check again. Anytime there's a line, read and move on to the next line and check to see. Sorry, yeah, that's pretty much it. And read that line. So okay, anytime there's a line, read that line, and then move on to the next line and check to see if there's a line on, or there's something on that line. Read it, move on to the next line, check to see if there's something on that line. There's a method. This kind of class has a method called hasNext, which checks to see if the file has a next line. Meaning, if this line has any content, read it. Move on to the next line, check to see if it has content, and read it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a while loop. Okay. Now we know the scanner class, okay, has a method for hasNext, right? Since this is the scanner object, that's the method we're going to use with it, right? So input file, while the input file dot hasNext, meaning while the input file has a line, do something, and then move on to the next line. Check to see if it has a line, and keep on moving. As soon as it has no line, it exits from the while loop. Okay, it returns false. This method returns false. This condition here returns false. If there's a line, it returns true, and then whatever is in the while loop block runs. So in that case, while it has a line, what we want to do is to read from that line, right? And then deposit. We want to go ahead and call our deposit method of our class, and then deposit that amount. Read that line and deposit that amount, right? So let's go ahead and call that method. So account1.deposit, while it has a line, account1.deposit, and we want to deposit that line, right? So we want to go ahead and read that line. So we know that the file contains doubles, right? It contains doubles. We can see over here 100.00, all doubles. So we want to say input file dot next double. So while it has a line, input file dot next double, okay, and then use that amount as a deposit into that class. Okay, all right. Now when we're done with that file, let's go ahead and close it. So let's close input file and use that same scanner object to represent, okay, to represent the withdrawals file. Okay, we're going to use that same kind of object to read from the withdrawals file. So now we've closed the deposits file. let's say input file is equal to, okay, now we've already declared that this input file is a scanner, right? Over here we've said it's a scanner, and now we are just creating a new scanner over here. You're just assigning it a new source. We are assigning it a new source to read from. So we're saying new scanner, and the source this time around is going to be okay, so actually we didn't create an object to represent our withdrawals files. Let's go ahead and do it. It's going to be the same as this. Let's go ahead and paste that here, and let's call that withdrawals file, and it's going to be withdrawals files because that's how we named it, right? Withdrawals file, withdrawal files. I'm not sure. Withdrawals file, the txt. So now the new source is going to be our withdrawals file. All right, so we want to also check to see if it has a line. Same idea here. If it has a line, read that line and move on to the next line and check to see if it has another line. So while the input file, although we're using the same name, the first at this point the input file represented the deposit file. We were done with it and we closed it, and then we assigned a new source to the input file over here, withdrawals file, and yeah, we assigned a new source, which is withdrawals file, to the inputs file over here. So we are now referring to the withdrawals file over here. And then when we're done with it, when we're done reading, this time we don't want to deposit, right? Because these are withdrawal values. So we want to withdraw from the account, and we have a withdrawal method in our savings account class here. It takes in an amount, okay, and then subtracts that from the balance. So this time around, we don't want to deposit, we want to withdraw. Okay, it reads the next double, and then it withdraws from the balance, checks to see if it has a next line, reads the next double, and then withdraws from the balance, and so on and so forth. And when we are done, we also want to go ahead and close the not that it's input file to close. We want to go ahead and close the withdrawals file, the scanner that's reading from the withdrawals file. Actually, that's what we want to do. We want to close the scanner that's reading from the withdrawals file. Okay, pretty much, that's what it means, pretty much. All right. So now that we're done with that, let's see what the question says next. All right. So let me just clear this.